As you're all aware, Congressman Mike Collins is under federal investigation for the illegal misuse of tax dollars. What you may not be aware of is that according to the Office of Congressional Conduct, Congressman Collins has been stonewalling and obstructing and refusing to cooperate with the investigation of this wrongdoing. Here are some quotes from the report issued by the Office of Congressional Conduct, a bipartisan official body of the United States House of Representatives. They wrote, quote, Representative Collins has not responded to any communications or requests from the Office of Congressional Conduct. They wrote that, quote, in so doing, Congressman Collins refused to cooperate with the Office of Congressional Conduct. Accordingly, they wrote, quote, the board recommends that the Committee on Ethics issue subpoenas to Representative Michael Collins. Now remember, this is in the document in which the Office of Congressional Conduct stated, quote, there is substantial reason to believe that Representative Collins used congressional resources for unofficial or otherwise unauthorized purposes. And furthermore, the Office of Congressional Conduct, in the course of their investigation, interviewed several witnesses, and this is a quote again from the Office of Congressional Conduct, quote, several witnesses, including current and former House staffers, expressed to the Office of Congressional Conduct concerns about possible retaliation for their cooperation. Let me be very clear about my message today. I am demanding that Congressman Mike Collins cooperate with this federal investigation into the illegal misuse of tax dollars, that he commit to testifying in this matter, and that he explain to Georgia voters and the press why he has refused to answer questions, refused to testify, stonewalled and obstructed the Office of Congressional Conduct. And as you prepare your reporting on this, and I say this with great respect for all of you as journalists, I want to make very clear that these are not my allegations. These are statements of fact from a bipartisan official body of the United States House of Representatives. Again, quote, Representative Collins has not responded to any communications or requests from the Office of Congressional Conduct. Quote, refused to cooperate with the Office of Congressional Conduct. Quote, the board recommends that the Committee on Ethics issue subpoenas to Representative Michael Collins. We are talking here about the illegal misuse of tax dollars. So let me again be very clear about my message today. I am demanding that Congressman Mike Collins fully cooperate with this investigation into his illegal misuse of tax dollars, that he commit to testifying, and that he explain to the public and to the press why he has been stonewalling, obstructing, and refusing to cooperate with this investigation. Let me also say it's not just me. You all have heard in just recent days prominent ethics experts, independent ethics experts, speak to the necessity of elected officials cooperating with ethics investigation. We have a sitting member of the United States Congress who now, more than a month after CNN reported his extensive ties to white nationalism and neo-Nazi ideology, still refuses to answer whether his business paid that neo-Nazi propagandist, and a sitting congressman who for months and months has stonewalled and refused to cooperate with a federal investigation into the illegal misuse of tax dollars. So I will say it one more time so there's absolute clarity about my message today. Congressman Collins must cooperate with this investigation. He must commit to testifying, and he must explain to the public and the press why he has refused to cooperate, why he has obstructed, and why he has stonewalled this investigation to date. I also want to be very clear that this is not going away. Just as the questions about whether his business paid that neo-Nazi propagandist are not going away. Just as the demand that he release all of the communications between his office and some of the country's most notorious white supremacists on their shared efforts on behalf of a Holocaust denier is not going away. Every single day for the rest of this campaign, if he fails to commit to cooperating with this investigation, my campaign will be demanding that he make that commitment, that he testify, that he explain his obstruction and stonewalling. And he's going to have to answer this question one way or another. And in fact, I would note for all of you, the congressman has a public appearance and a press conference later this afternoon. He should be asked at that press conference whether he will testify and why he has refused to cooperate to date. We'll see if he answers that question or if he once again flees the scene. Thank you so much, and looking forward to your questions.
All right, we will now open it up to questions. If you all have any questions, once again, feel free to drop those questions in the chat or raise your hand. We will give it a second and see if any questions come into the chat or if anyone raises their hand. I'm not seeing anything so far. If anyone has any questions. Oh, see your hand raised, Greg. I will pass it over to you.
You would think I would know how to use this after all these years, but I couldn't find the hand raised thing. Senator Ossoff, thank you for doing this. Question about the process. I mean, isn't part of this the process question in terms of these House ethics probes lasting for years in some cases? And in fact, you know, I think the charges, or at least the allegations, are already being dropped against Brandon Phillips because he's no longer in that role. Isn't part of this a process issue with the House Ethics Committee taking so long?
Greg, let me first address the point you made about Mr. Phillips, and then I'll answer you directly with respect to the process. You raised Mr. Phillips. Let's remember that part of what's at issue here is this is an investigation into the illegal use of tax dollars to pay the congressman's violent staffer's girlfriend for a no-show job. And the only reason that Mr. Phillips now evades the jurisdiction of the U.S. House of Representatives is that finally, at long last, after controversy, he's no longer in that post. As for the process here, already the congressman has refused to cooperate with the Office of Congressional Conduct, which has recommended that the Ethics Committee issue subpoenas. And that's why what I'm saying today is I am demanding that the congressman cooperate fully with this matter, that he commit to testifying, whether or not a subpoena is issued. It should not require a subpoena to secure the cooperation of a member of Congress with an investigation into the illegal misuse of tax dollars by his office, and further, that the congressman explain forthrightly and honestly why he has refused to cooperate. And I think you know this, Greg, but for other members of the press, the Office of Congressional Conduct is a bipartisan body. It is the most credible entity in the U.S. House of Representatives for investigating wrongdoing by members of Congress. And according to the Office of Congressional Conduct, Congressman Collins, quote, refused to cooperate, and the Office of Congressional Conduct, quote, recommends that the Committee on Ethics issue subpoenas to Congressman Mike Collins. How arrogant does a sitting congressman have to be to, as he seeks a 6-year term in the U.S. Senate, refuse to cooperate with a federal investigation into the illegal misuse of tax dollars by his office? And so again, let me be very clear. I am demanding that Congressman Collins cooperate fully in this matter, that he commit to testifying, and that he explain his obstruction and stonewalling to date.
All right, we will go to Niles Francis next.
Mr. Francis.
Senator, how are we doing?
Fine, thank you.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the issues. Like yesterday, the president, like the president's tariffs, like I don't need to tell you, they're all over the place. Now they're impacting cattle, ground beef. What are your thoughts on that? How do you how do you expect Congressman Collins to respond to that?
Look, I stand by Georgia ranchers and Georgia cattlemen, and I would note that the president promised to lower prices on day one, and ground beef is up 20% since he was sworn in. Diesel's up almost 50%. Gasoline's up 30%. Congressman Mike Collins has voted for the disastrous Trump tariffs, just like he voted for the war in Iran, just like he voted to double health insurance premiums for more than 1 million Georgians. And Niles, that same Congressman Collins needs to cooperate with this ongoing ethics matter. He needs to commit to testifying before the House Ethics Committee, and he needs to explain his stonewalling and obstruction to date. Thank you.
All right, we're going to go to Skylar Henry with CBS next.
Hey, Senator, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you, Skylar.
So in terms of the process and in terms of a timeline, what would you expect should Congressman Collins say he wants to do this? Would you expect something to happen immediately? Do you think that a process would have to play out in order for that to come into fruition?
There is a process, and what the congressman needs to do is commit to cooperate with it. It is simply unacceptable that a sitting member of Congress running for the Senate has refused to cooperate with the Office of Congressional Conduct. This is a federal investigation into the illegal misuse of tax dollars. Congressman Collins has stonewalled it, obstructed it, refused to cooperate it, such that the Office of Congressional Conduct has to recommend the issuance of subpoenas. Should a sitting member of Congress have to be hauled forcibly before an ethics panel to answer questions about the illegal misuse of tax dollars when there's this bipartisan finding of substantial reason to believe he, quote, used congressional resources for unofficial or otherwise unauthorized purposes? What higher obligation do we have than to be judicious and ethical stewards of official resources? These are Georgians' tax dollars. This is an investigation into their illegal misuse by the congressman. The congressman has stonewalled, obstructed, and refused to cooperate with the Office of Congressional Conduct. I am demanding that he cooperate. I am demanding that he commit to testifying. I am demanding that he explain to Georgia voters why he has refused to cooperate now for so many months.
And real quickly, just to follow up, if it doesn't happen, then what?
Then he'll be held accountable by the voters, just as he'll be held accountable by the voters for refusing to answer whether his business has paid this neo-Nazi propagandist, just like he'll be held accountable by the voters for refusing to release all of the communications between his office and some of the country's most notorious white supremacists, and just as he'll be held accountable by the voters for voting for this disastrous war in Iran, for the Trump tariffs that have sent prices soaring, and to throw 300,000 Georgians off their health care and double health insurance premiums for more than 1 million Georgians.
going to go back to Greg Bluestein with the AJC real quick, then we'll go to Lindsay McPherson.
Yeah, Senator, a follow-up on a different topic. I want to ask you about the Supreme Court's ruling that allowed Trump's administration to move forward with their plans to restrict mail-in voting before the midterm elections. Obviously, here in Georgia, it's a major concern. Any issue that could restrict the right to vote has been a hot topic here, so I want to get your thoughts.
It's shameful that the president, so fearful of defeat and accountability, is trying to make it harder for Georgia voters to vote. We saw him send his spies and agents to Fulton County to seize Georgia voters' ballots. And I think the president is making a huge mistake coming to the cradle of the civil rights movement to attack voting rights. Because what I am hearing from folks across Georgia is that these attacks on voting rights are only intensifying the determination to turn out to the polls in record numbers and hold Donald Trump accountable.
All right, we'll go to Lindsay McPherson with the Washington Times to close us out.
Hi, thanks for doing the call and taking the question.
Thank you, Lindsay.
I just wanted to clarify just kind of the impetus between why you want to bring this up now. Obviously, Mike Collins has been the nominee for months. This OCC report was transmitted to the House Ethics Committee last September, and so all this stonewalling that you're talking about occurred last year. I mean, do you have any knowledge that he's recently stonewalled the House Ethics Committee investigation? What is kind of like the current status that is why you're bringing this up now?
Oh, Lindsay, thank you so much for that excellent question. And the reason this is relevant now is that in less than 2 months, Georgia voters will go to the polls to start voting and determine who will represent this state in the United States Senate for a 6-year term. And so it is relevant whether a sitting congressman who seeks election to the Senate is continuing to obstruct and refuse to cooperate with an investigation into the illegal misuse of tax dollars. This gets directly to Congressman Collins' character and integrity, to the ethics of his stewardship of official resources, and whether or not he respects Georgia voters. Because a congressman who respects Georgia voters while seeking election would answer these questions in a forthright way. A congressman who respects Georgia voters would answer whether his business has been paying a neo-Nazi propagandist. A congressman who respects Georgia voters would cooperate with a probe into his office's illegal misuse of tax dollars and would commit to testifying. I suggest respectfully, Lindsay, that you put these questions to the congressman as he seeks the votes of Georgians to represent the state in the Senate, and let's see what he has to say.
All right, do we have any final questions? We're getting ready to wrap up here. Just want to give everyone one last chance. Chauncey, I see you have your hand raised. Chauncey, go ahead. Chauncey from the Capital B News.
Senator Ossoff, you and Representative Collins have agreed to a couple of debates. Do you plan to bring these topics up to him during the debates? And, what are your thoughts on, any type of response that he might give?
Yes, at long last, Congressman Collins has agreed to those debates. It took him a while, but he got there. I challenged him to 3. He has agreed to 2 so far. Of course, this will come up at the debates. The congressman will have to defend his non-cooperation with a bipartisan federal investigation into the illegal misuse of tax dollars by his office. The congressman will have to defend his office briefing some of the nation's most notorious white supremacists on efforts in support of a Holocaust denier. The congressman will have to defend his votes for the Iran war, for the Trump tariffs, and to double health insurance premiums for more than 1 million Georgians. And I look forward to vigorously prosecuting the case against Congressman Collins for his egregious misconduct. And again, let me be very clear. The congressman's holding a press conference this afternoon. He should be asked, will he cooperate in this matter? Will he commit to testifying, and why for months and months and months did he stonewall, obstruct, and refuse to cooperate with the Office of Congressional Conduct?
We have one question in the chat from Leanne Caldwell. It says, Senator, will you encourage your supporters to not vote by mail after the SCOTUS rulings?
Leanne, we will defend voting rights vigorously in Georgia. We will educate every eligible voter to ensure that they can participate in the way that makes the most sense for them. We're watching carefully these developments and the president's ongoing attacks on voting rights to make sure we're equipping and empowering Georgia voters with the best information.